Hello, and welcome to the AppleInsider Podcast. This is your host, Wes Hilliard, and I'm joined by William Gallagher. Our sponsors this week are Notion and Fastmail. In addition to ad-free episodes, paid subscribers get the bonus Apple Insider Plus segment, and this week we're going to talk about how we decide between digital and physical media when we buy something. Are we going to buy a DVD, a Blu-ray? Are we going to buy it on iTunes, if that even exists anymore, and how we manage those collections and what goes behind that kind of thinking. So that should be an interesting topic. What do you think, William?
I'm looking forward to that because I have a complicated confession to make about my next Blu-ray purchase, considering I don't have a Blu-ray player. But you're right, we have to leave it to then. Yes, okay.
Of course. But speaking of media, I wanted to start off the episode with some really interesting news. It was kind of happening as we recorded the previous episode, but it kind of flew by me. But the Apple Music announced that they were going to announce the 100 best albums of all time. And the entire concept is funny to me because it's such a subjective concept. But we've seen this before, top 100 lists from Rolling Stone and various magazines have tackled this. MTV has tried similar lists, but Apple Music seems to be taking a very different approach. And I wonder, have you been paying attention to this at all?
I have, yes, but it's different approach code for they got it wrong, you don't agree with them.
It's not that. No, I think it really is just a different approach. And my musical taste is very broad. So I did not have a strong opinion about this list because looking at it makes a lot of sense what's here. Examining what's missing, it makes sense why there are things missing. I've noticed a lot of people, of course, jumping in and saying, why isn't so-and-so in this list? Why is this one higher than the other? I think the problem is a lot of people see bits and pieces of the list, but don't look into the actual what happened here. And this isn't someone going and pulling an algorithm and saying, hey, Apple Music, what are the top 100 streamed albums? That's not this list. This isn't even a panel of 4 judges went through and just picked a bunch of things that they really liked. This is a globally vetted list that was sourced from hundreds of votes on what should be included, and then an entire process of deciding of voting to get positioning, basically, of the top 100. So it's this complex process filled with artists, music journalists, producers, composers, songwriters, all kinds of people in the industry who should know. People like, I would have to assume people like what's his name, Jimmy. There's too many J names. John. I wanted to say Johnny for some reason, but Jimmy Iovine. He absolutely, people like that. Zane Lowe. I saw someone say, yeah, this is just a Western picked list, and it's like Zane Lowe is from New Zealand, right? So I don't know this, and he's like the main guy at Apple Music. So I just wonder, have you looked at this list, and what do you think of what's on here?
Studied this list, and I am aghast that the Kids from Fame isn't anywhere in sight. I figure they were probably at 101. That's where they probably came in at. You don't even know what the Kids from Fame is. I was trying to find an example there. I thought, should I try the Wombles or something? You'd never get that. Thought it'd be safe with the Kids from Fame, but no.
The Wombats, maybe? No, I've never heard of this, no.
Okay, I can't say your musical education is lacking, but I'd like to. I think the list is fine. I'm intrigued by certain things on it.
People seem upset that the list is comprised of, I would say, the last 60 years or so of music, but the last 60 years also includes the last 5 years, and people are upset to say, like, how can you pick an album that came out in 2018 as part of this top 100 list? But again, I think that just goes into the selection process. They didn't go into detail, but there's actually a lot of information about this list. This is one of Apple's rare synergistic displays that I actually really enjoy. Some people find it terrible. I don't know why. They have all these things. Why not take advantage of it? But Apple Music had playlists, radio stations, DJs, discussions, all the way through this process. You can go back and listen to those there's an hour-long episode where professional music people talk about 10 of the selections, 10 at a time.
Right.
So there's 10 hours of content just about this list. And the Apple Music versions play the music during it, so it's really nice. Then there's the podcast side of this. You can go listen to Apple Podcasts with an Apple Music subscription, where they go through the whole list, similar to the radio shows, just multiple cut-ups, so you can just jump straight to a certain album. But after you get to number one, they break it up into a 3-part documentary. It's an audio documentary on Apple Podcasts about their number one choice, and we'll get to that in a moment. And then so you have the Apple Music component, the Apple Podcast component, and Apple News has the music journalist side of things with the Apple Music section and Apple News with a bunch of coverage there as well. So just really cool that they did this. It feels like an event, and I'm the only one attending because I don't know if there's anyone on the internet actually talking about this. With the death of Twitter and the downfall of Reddit, as far as I'm concerned in my personal life, I know Reddit still exists. It's just they kind of broke things there, and I don't like it anymore. It feels like there's just where do people talk about this stuff anymore? And I'm assuming it's TikTok.
Well, I was going to say in person, around water coolers, or top of my head, on podcasts. One thing I thought about this was. Guaranteed to be controversial. There's no possible way
Absolutely.
Any list could ever be right unless it's your own. But it does introduce... I mean, there's so much on here that I'd never heard of before, and now, in theory, I could go listen to it. Except, number one, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I'm reasonably sure I bought that on CD whenever it actually came out.
I was wondering about that.
I don't think I've ever played it. I can't think of a single thing from it. So here's all this great stuff, and I hope I'm not going to ignore it and carry on.
I highly recommend, especially since we're having this discussion, what is it now, 16 years after that album released? If you haven't
16?
properly... Yeah, so because it came out in 1998, so if I'm doing that math right... I'm familiar with this album. So some people actually had never even heard of this album, and that might be due to their age.
16 years ago, 1998. There's something wrong here, and I can't.
Am I doing? Oh, I did do the math wrong. My goodness. See, this is. I am permanently in like 2004, 14, I guess, because that's how years work in my head. I always lose a decade in the math. But no, it's actually 26 years ago, and I am now feeling much older.
Oh, that's a quarter of a century. I've had that disc on a shelf somewhere.
And it's a long time.
Oh,
but, okay, so I was 7 at the time, so it's not like I was waiting in line at the record store to buy this. But
can I just say, you're really not helping now. That's just... right, I'm walking away from this discussion.
But no,
okay,
looking at it now with my current understanding of music, and I understand this is AppleInsider Podcast, so we won't spend too much time on this, guys, don't worry. I have heard this album in places several times throughout my life just because of its importance, and so I've never gone out of my way. It wasn't like in my Apple Music collection, but I was at least familiar with it by today, and it is fascinating that it is the number one choice. I think it makes a lot of sense. Look into the history of... Don't look at just the album. Look at the history of this album. There is so much here, and that audio documentary helps clarify some of this, but it has to do with... If you don't know who Lauryn Hill is, you definitely know who the Fugees are. And what was that hit? See, now I'm doing it. It skyrocketed the Fugees to fame, and they were actually in the middle.
Wasn't it a
singing
cover version
softly?
of,
what's the song? Killing Me Softly. With words, right?
No, Killing Me Softly with your song. No.
With your song, that's it, yes.
Yes,
yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot of words, maybe that's why I couldn't remember the specific title, but that song is everywhere. Everyone knows that song. I would be surprised if you hadn't heard it at some point, even if you're, under the age of 20. it's had to have come up at some point.
Hmm.
And anyway, so she was on tour because of this album with the Fugees and in a relationship with Wyclef Jean, and things went south. And she met Bob Marley's son on tour, and during all of this, she falls in love with him. She's writing this solo album. She's pregnant. She's being told by everyone, hey, abort that pregnancy. Focus on your career. You just hit it big. If you have a baby now, it's all over. And so this album became this righteous cry out of, no, I am this person who is fighting for relevance in existence as a mother and as an artist and as a lover. And it's just such a fascinating, powerful story. And then you listen to the lyrics of the album and you listen to these songs. To Zion brings tears to my eyes, and Carlos Santana, of course, on the guitar, just amazing. But there's just so much history here. John Legend, at like 17 years old, is on the piano on Everything Is Everything, right? Like there's just so much musical history here. And so it makes a lot of sense when you dig into it. It's not, of course, Thriller, which some people think is overrated. There's of course going to be a lot of discussion over why Prince, why wasn't Prince ahead of Thriller with Purple Rain? But one thing that the Apple Music producers reiterated 100 million times during the show that they did is this list, they didn't even know what it was going to look like when it was finished because it was a voting process. And they were surprised by the miseducation of Lauryn Hill, but they like the choice. But the list, of course, is meant to drive discussion, and that's what it's done. Not everyone's going to agree with it, but of course it's going to make you have some introspection and say, what would my top 100 list be? And I recommend everyone go and check out, go listen to at least one song from every album. Just make an afternoon of it. It's so fun. There's so much human history here. And the Apple Music shows they did, I think, are really fun to listen to.
I can't get enough of the detail behind things we don't think about. So the history behind a song. But in a way, this actually reminds me of a thing I've been doing this week is, for no purpose at all other than fun, playing with the new Logic Pro stem splitter. You know, this thing where it will take a track and split it out so you can listen to just the vocal, just the drums, just the bass guitar, or Apple calls it other, where they mean everything else. You can listen to any of those or any combination of those. So I was listening to Kate Bush's vocal on The Central World with nothing around it, and it's just mesmerizing for it. And the fact that you take her out and you listen to just the drum solos for it, and you think the work and the effort and the artistry, brilliant. Yeah. So
we got to move on because I just realized we've been talking about this for several minutes, but I do want to point out one thing. I've seen I'll reiterate, it's difficult to find discussion around this because Apple Music isn't Spotify, but a lot of people do use it, and I don't think Apple made this expecting me to enjoy it, right? I feel like there's an audience out there, and there are people talking about it, and that's great. But some of the commentary I've seen around it is quite annoying, if only because it seems like it comes from a place of just my favorite band wasn't represented in this, so now I hate it automatically, and that's just so short-sighted and annoying. And I wanted to point out part of this selection process again was, I think they even just completely disregarded popularity. There are a lot of popular award-winning albums in here, of course. Many of these albums have been indoctrinated into the Library of Congress because of their contributions to humanity. But I think just that's part of it. It's these musicians and artists that selected this list know the impact these albums had, and that's the key. Albums. Some artists are amazing creators that write number one hits that are just chart-topping, amazing stuff, but they're good at writing singles. Albums is the key term here. That's why. So my girlfriend was asking, so where's Dolly Parton on this list? It's like, well, tell me one album Dolly Parton wrote that it was revolutionary and that that didn't happen because Dolly Parton is an excellent songwriter that wrote a lot of very good singles across dozens of albums that she's released over time. But there was never an album that had 6 songs on it that was just like each one was just the Dolly Parton banger. It just didn't happen. And then, that's why you look at some of these and you say, well, why is this one ahead of this one? And it's like, yes, this techno track from Germany or whatever, I forget the name of it, but it influenced a lot of music. Yeah, it's number like 57. And Daft Punk is ahead of them because everyone actually heard of Daft Punk, right? Influence doesn't necessarily mean best. A lot of these albums were influential and built the groundwork for something else to become more popular. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it should be ahead of it on the list either. So it's just so interesting to think about, I think.
I do actually agree, except there's a bit there. All of this focus on albums, I think that's a good thing. But streaming music has really destroyed the album, hasn't it? Because actually iTunes originally, when
the music industry destroyed the album. William, you were there for this, right? I mean, the music industry really pushed artists to produce.
This is all about my age, but so
they pushed artists to produce singles and then buried those singles on 13-track CDs that had a bunch of garbage on it that they didn't have to pay for. So the music industry was maximizing profit on CDs with terrible music, one good song, and you paid $13 for the honor. And that's why the iPod was so important, and iTunes.
And then you actually had Thriller, where the Thriller have 6 or 8 singles off it. So you bought a couple of those because you like them, and then thought, this is good, I'll buy the album. So net money, you were out by not buying the album first. Okay. Mm-hmm. But, all right, so is this Apple saying, come back, albums are great, we're sorry that the music industry has gone this way?
I think Apple's had that stance for a while, and you can see that in the way that they produce music, because Apple does help produce some music with certain artists, and Apple's been a fan of creating these. They'll bring an artist to a studio and have these broken down tracks, and they create these beautiful like messages of their work through these collaborations, and I think Apple has always been pro album. And I think it's funny because, so some people's reaction was, well, Spotify would never. And I think I agree for a different reason, if only because Spotify doesn't have the creative integrity to create a list like this accurately. It would just feel probably robotic and soulless. And I think that's fair because Spotify's entire business is predicated on the fact that they purchased an algorithm that is an amazing algorithm and makes awesome recommendations and playlists. And that is the benefit of Spotify, absolutely. But they've leaned so heavily into that. That's why Apple has reacted with humanity. And that's why from day one of Apple Music, it's been human curated, has been their mantra. And that hasn't changed in all these years.
This all reminds me of the first time I ever saw an algorithm for picking music. It's about in the 1980s. I was working at BBC local radio, and up to a certain point, the DJs picked all of their music the way you would expect. But after a certain point, they had a PC in the corner, an apricot PC, if anybody's ever heard of those, outside the UK. And on it was an app called, software called Selector. And I remember resenting the idea that an algorithm could program this. And then I looked at the list for the shows I was working on, and I thought, well, actually, I really like all of those songs for it. It had I was the right demographic for our station, so it knew us well. Give it fair there. This episode is brought to you by Notion. The quick way to describe Notion is to say that it's what used to sometimes be called an everything bucket. It's a Mac app, an iPhone, an iPad app, and an online service, all of them, where you can save notes, write documents, make plans, organise and explore, well, everything you do in your work. And not just you or not just I alone. Notion is a place where any team can write, plan, organise, and rediscover the joy of play. Now, okay, the word joy, that is overused these days. I think its meaning is being worn away, and none of us feel like we could play when we should be working. But in this case, both words are exactly right. Notion gives you so many options, but it doesn't ever get in your way with them. So you might be busy working away doing something, and then it crosses your mind, it'd be really good if I could do this, and you find that you can. Such as today, actually today, when I found an option I had somehow entirely missed in Notion. I've just got back into reading a lot of magazine and website articles, long articles, on my iPad. And so, yeah, naturally, I've also just got back to the problem where there isn't time right now to read something, and the problem that you don't want to lose it. So I've been looking around at dedicated read it later services, as they're called, but today I found out, I can just chuck an article into Notion and come back to it whenever I want. That is handy, but then this is handier. There is a Notion web clipper, originally for Chrome, but now also for Safari, which is the browser I use. And with the Notion web clipper installed into Safari, when I see yet another BBC News article about UK general election, well, I can just click, save it to Notion, and read it whenever I like. Notion is for work, but it is also fun, and yes, even joyous. Don't take my word for it. Find out for yourself. Try Notion for free when you go to notion.com/AppleInsider. One important thing, that's all lowercase letters, notion.com/AppleInsider. Go there and start turning ideas into action. And also, when you use our link, you're supporting our show. So thank you. Notion.com/AppleInsider, and thanks to Notion for supporting the Apple Insider podcast.
Speaking of algorithms and music, one last little tidbit. We have some more iOS 18 related information, and it looks like Apple Music is going to get some new features. Specifically, I wanted to point out smart transitions. And I actually... This was completely unrelated. I didn't know this information was incoming, but a few days ago I posted on Mastodon a statement saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if Shuffle on Apple Music could know when there's skits or spoken tracks and just not include those when I'm just shuffling music? Because maybe I just want music to play and I don't want to hear a 3-minute soliloquy about... or like a skit on a rap album where they're making fun of, like just that kind of things. Like everyone knows what I'm talking about. They're everywhere. They're enjoyable on their own. When I'm listening to Logic's Incredible True Story, I am here to hear Steve Bloom in his raspy voice talking about space travel. Like I love that, but I don't want to hear that when I'm just shuffling music working at my computer. Because that for whatever reason, spoken tracks take me out of something, whereas music lets me lean into something. So Apple seems to have heard my complaint. They've come out with a feature called Smart Transitions. Now, we don't know what it does, but it appears that it's going to use algorithms to determine exactly how every song transition can be improved by... Instead of just lowering the volume on one and raising the volume on the other, it's going to intelligently transition between tracks. So I can only hope, this is my assumption, that means maybe it'll know to get rid of the spoken tracks as well. But that's just me wish casting at this point.
I can tell you the rule in radio, if I can remember accurately, is rather than fading out one and bringing in the other, you bring in the new one full volume and then fade out the old, so that there's a consistent level of volume across the lot. But what you're telling me is that you and Apple are likely to destroy the start and the end of Dexy's Midnight Runners, Come On Eileen. And I admit the start and the end are a bit rubbish before you get into the bit we all remember. But it's the artist's intention to do this, and isn't there an argument that if spoken word stuff takes you out of it, tough. Well, go listen to something else that doesn't have them.
This is something that we talked about last episode. So, passive watching was a topic on the last episode of having something on the TV but not actually paying attention to it. Well, let me introduce William. Passive listening.
Right. I haven't forgiven you for the passive watching yet, but all right, add to the list. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, passive listening, of course, I mean, obviously, but like, it's just, I am a person who enjoys music in a way it's a hobby. So I will sit down and actively listen to an album and study its lyrics and study the sound and really break it down with an amazing set of speakers or headphones and just really sit down and enjoy it. That's when I want to hear it in the most pure form, the way the artist intended, no weird nonsense. But again, if I just have something on in the background somewhere, I'm okay with a little bit of algorithm mixing. I like the idea that I can have a built-in intelligent DJ that will do what. So one of some of the best radio stations on Apple Music live radio that they have Apple Music One, or Apple Music Hits, which is my preference usually. Some of the DJs will just stay out of it. They'll introduce themselves, and every now and then they'll jump in and be like, "Hey, it's me, Brooke Reese or whatever. I'm doing this thing today." But they'll just play the songs, and then they will just jump between them. Sometimes you'll hear 2 minutes of a song, sometimes you'll hear 30 seconds of a song, but they will just blend them so well that it's just fun. It feels like you're at a club almost, because that's what live DJs usually do. It'd be kind of cool to have an algorithm do that for me, and that could be a really fun party tool. But again, just the passive listening aspect of this sounds cool too.
I was at, I think it's called Global Radio. I can't remember the name of the station, a commercial station here in the UK, visiting a friend who was presenting, and she was playing some song. It was about a minute into it, and she thought, I can't remember how this one ends. What am I going to play out afterwards? So while it was playing on air, she listened to the end of it and figured out which advert segued best into it, and when it came to that point, played it. And for me, raised on radio stations with vinyl, I thought that was just gorgeous that she was able to do that. That's
being that kind of...
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're saying about new features. I was reading about this word, really, pass-through, that was coming to Apple Music.
We don't know. We have no idea.
Right.
That's why I wasn't even going to bring it up, because it's just a word in a settings screen. It has to do with Dolby Atmos. That's as far as we can figure out. But that's it. We have no idea what it means or what it does. I have assumptions that we haven't written down, because assumptions are useless. But
sure.
I can assume that pass-through is just a rebranding of head-tracked Dolby Atmos, but I think what they might do is use some intelligent instrument positioning, because Dolby Atmos tracks gives us individual directional audio streams, and maybe pass-through will allow you to move the audio out of your focal point and have it be, again, this passive listening thing, and have it be behind or beside you while you work, and then have what's in front of you be the focal point. So maybe you have multiple audio streams going. Maybe you have a phone call on and some jazz in the background, right? So that's what pass-through sounds like to me, is it's allowing the audio to be passive, but maybe I'm reading into it too much. Maybe it's literally just a rebrand of head tracking Dolby Atmos.
I did once have a brief job where I was required to wear headphones so that I could listen to one audio stream in the left ear and a completely different source in the right, and monitor them both through Portal and something. But that was not fun. So I don't think I'll be switching that on deliberately. But again, I don't really understand things like Dolby Atmos and stuff. I'm just going to have to wait till it happens and then listen to it to find out, aren't I?
Atmos can make a song better, and it can ruin it depending on how it's mixed.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I have definitely encountered some spatial audio tracks, as Apple calls it. I've encountered some spatial audio that just makes a song just be like, what is happening to the music right now? Because the vocals are pushed too far away and the drums are taking over, and whoever mixed this obviously either didn't understand what the artist wanted, or just did a poor job of it. But that happens sometimes. But most of the time, I found spatial tracks are really fun, especially on HomePods. But moving on, we have spent so much time on music. I'm sure we will now be rebranded as the Apple Music Podcast. But let's get on to the next media thing, emoji. The thing that you hate the most.
No. Let's stay on music, please. Not emoji, no.
Just briefly, we got a little sign of what possibly might be coming soon, and I see one that looks just like William in this conversation. The face with eye bags looks very unhappy, and I'm assuming that's the same look William's giving me right now, though I can't see him. Splatter.
Well, actually, I'm sorry, at this moment, I'm giving you, can't you see?
No.
There you go. The value of an emoji. I just performed an emoji for you, and I felt you got the point. But okay, carry
People
on
love
with the
these
list
things.
of things I'm never going to use. But all right,
Fingerprint leafless tree, shovel, harp. I mean, cute, I guess. Cool. There's 7 of them here. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of new positions and skin tones and things included in other emoji. This
Wes,
is something that we might not see until the spring of next year, though.
Wes, let's meet up by the leafless tree next to the sad-looking person. I can't see many situations when I would need these new emoji, but
I don't know. I feel like emojis can sometimes feel a little cryptic, and it's kind of like you're communicating in code for a drug deal. Bring the shovel to the leafless tree, and you'll get some beats, I guess. Anyway, so emoji, they're coming. Apple uses these to leverage usually a few updates in. It forces people to update to the new operating system because nobody wants a question mark when they're texting. It's a good tool because people like emojis other than William, and Apple usually puts it out in like 18.4 or whatever. So this is probably a spring release next year, or because this is coming out this summer, it could be all the way to iOS 19. We will see.
This episode is brought to you by Fastmail. Now, later in this edition of the AppleInsider Podcast, you are doubtlessly going to hear me tell Wes that I relish email. It is by far my favourite way to communicate. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you or I can't do it better. It doesn't mean that I even love jumping every time there's a ping of a new email, or that I like dropping everything to reply, because if I don't, that email's going to be on my mind until I do. And loving email does not mean like getting into, if you've been in those ping pong back and forth replies of quick emails, replies and replies to replies, that actually I do like that, and I'm a bit guilty of it, but I don't like it quite so much, right, when, say, it's about midnight for me here in England, but my recipient is in some time zone that means, well, they're still at work. You know where this is leading, though. Fastmail gives you all of the best things about email, and it takes away all that you could call a chore, really, such as that midnight email tennis match. It will always start, because one email has arrived in my inbox that I suppose I could possibly ignore with superhuman effort, but that's not going to happen. There's something about it that will keep me awake all night. It doesn't have to be a bad email, just something I'm thinking about. But with Fastmail, in comes that message, you're thinking about it, you can reply to that email right there and then, yet schedule when your reply gets sent. Schedule your reply so that it goes out 9 a.m. tomorrow, your time, or, well, really whenever you like. The email is dealt with right then, it's off your mind. But the recipient won't see it until, say, office hours, and so won't get to keep replying to you over and over. Well, at least not until office hours tomorrow. Or one more thing, that all works great, right, when you can reply. When email comes in and, you know what you want to say, but oftentimes the reply takes a bit more work than that. You're going to have to go find out things. You have to research. You're going to do all sorts of things before you can usefully answer. And that's fine. Actually, often that's great. But what it always means is you can't answer the email immediately. And that always means it stays on your mind and in your inbox, pressing away at you. Unless you tell Fastmail to snooze the message. And Fastmail does snoozing the right way. Apple added recently what it calls a snooze feature, but it's like they didn't read to the end of the question, because if you snooze a message in Apple Mail, it will still sit there in your inbox. It will still distract you. It'll still press down on you. Snooze with Fastmail, though, is totally different. It's totally right. In this case, with Fastmail, the email in question, it vanishes from your inbox. It leaves your inbox, it leaves your site, it leaves your mind, and then it comes back at a time you decide. It comes back at a time when you've decided you can concentrate on it. So, make email better for you with Fastmail. Try Fastmail free for 30 days and get 10% off your first year by going to fastmail.com/AppleInsider. That's Fastmail. Fast as in really quick, F-A-S-T. Mail as in, well, mail, mail.com/AppleInsider. Fastmail.com/AppleInsider. And thanks to Fastmail for supporting the Apple Insider podcast.
The iPad Pro, we've had some time with it now. I only had a very short time with it last episode, but a lot of information has come out anything specific jump out to you, William, that you want to discuss?
Yeah, the fact that you've had an iPad Pro for a while. You said we, but I haven't. I don't remember much envy. Great. Yeah,
the royal we. The world was included
the royal
in that we. Yes,
I'm hearing quite constantly that the M4 is overpowered for what the iPad can do. I'm also hearing questions of whether it was worth the effort to move the camera around so that they had to do a new pencil. Couldn't they mount it on the other side? I'm hearing that all the speaker stuff inside has changed, and I was wondering about is the sound quality actually as good as people say?
Well,
yeah,
there's
all of this.
There's a lot of discussion around this. I'll just say honestly, it's an iPad. It's an iPad Pro. It's running iPad OS. The hardware is impossible. It feels impossible. I wrote a hands-on. We're saving the review for a little later because it feels like we can discuss things more clearly after having it for a while. So, no early review this time. The hands-on, take that as kind of the early review, I guess, just rebranded. And we will be doing a full review before WWDC. So keep an eye out for that. But and also, by the way, I was on the iPad Pros podcast with Tim Chatton, and that was a lot of fun. We spent literally a couple hours discussing the iPad and still ran out of time because there's so much to talk about. And that'll be out, I believe, before WWDC. So I'll mention on the show here when it's actually available. But
right, I'll make sure we have links to that because I want to hear that. But
yeah, that's not this week. It will probably be literally the week of like that Friday WWDC right before it, which is actually coming up very quickly. But for me, the iPad Pro, it's super thin. None of my accessories work with it. I'm working on replacing some stands that I have around the house. I'll be doing some roundups on those to discuss which ones are good and whatnot. The speakers, they're still speakers. I mostly still use my devices with earbuds. Honestly, between my phone and iPads, I very rarely hear their natural speakers, just because I'm just usually have some kind of earpod in, and then, but I'm sure they're amazing. Like the iPad speakers have always been great. They actually can do weirdly spatial stuff, even though they're coming out of a tablet. The OLED, we discussed this before, so not to reiterate. OLED, of course, beautiful, great picture, nano texture. I'm still happy with my choice. It's perfect. I haven't broken anything.
But what about reports? I don't know if this is more with nano texture or not, but that there's a graininess to the OLED screen that people weren't expecting.
The grainy display problem. So people assume this is OLED, but no, or this is nano texture, but this is actually to do with OLED, and I find it kind of funny. So people are interesting on the internet, to say the least. Any technology has pros and cons, and one of the cons of having all of your LEDs be a single light source on a giant panel means that you're more likely to find a way to see that at different viewing angles, more than perhaps you could with a backlight, because the backlight is obscured by the pixel plane of the LED panel. So you're not going to see that thing. There's a word for it. What is it even? Mura? I've never said this word out loud before, but Moira, I've heard some people, I guess, pronounce it. But it's an effect that basically creates kind of a grain. I've never seen this. And I think the people seeing this are taking the macro camera on their phone and pushing it up against the screen to see it, kind of thing. Like, it's not going to come up in regular use. It can sometimes occur because of irregular voltage across the panel. If you see anything that looks broken, it's probably broken. So go to an Apple store with it. But for me, with my iPad and daily use so far, I've never come across like a grainy screen, whatever that's supposed to mean, I suppose. Like from the description, even from the photos, it's just I've never seen this for my own use. Again, I think this is one of those weird things, kind of like jelly scrolling. You really have to go out of your way to find it, like taking a microscope to your display.
Okay, all right then. That's removed the one barrier I had about buying it.
Nano texture, I got on this on the iPad Pros podcast, but Nanotexture is such a funny discussion because now that I've really had more time with it and listened to other people's criticisms, this is the first Apple product I think Apple's ever made that you can't get. You can't learn anything from looking at it through a video. You can't learn anything from it from looking at it at an Apple store. The only way you're going to know whether or not nanotexture is for you is by buying it and taking it home. And I know that's terrible as a recommendation, but the reality is the lighting conditions of real life are starkly different from an Apple store, and you'll never get representative interactions with that nanotexture display. It's always going to look overly bright, overly gray, because there's just so much light in that room. And no, that's not what sunlight looks like either. Sunlight isn't coming from 100 different LED bulbs in the ceiling pointed at white walls reflecting it off of the white floors and brown tables. Real sunlight is just a single source of light that and of course the sky effect and all of that, but it's different. Even when I'm outdoors with the iPad Pro, if I'm looking at it from the proper angle, it still looks like a clean, crisp, beautiful OLED display. It's when light sources directly hit the screen that you start to notice that what you would call a graying effect in the blacks, because the light is literally being diffused into the surface of the display, and that causes blacks to light up a little bit. But that micron of difference in black level is so worth the trade-off of I can see my display in any condition. Whereas, yeah, you can get perfect blacks on a glossy display, but in the places where that graying effect's going to occur, now you either see a perfect reflection of your face or a reflection of a giant light bulb in the background and you no longer see your content. That's the trade-off. So when people see these silly videos on YouTube of I'm standing side by side with a glossy display and a nanotexture display, in real life, you're never, like, if you buy one of these iPads, you're never going to go home and have two iPads to compare side by side. A lot of these display what people would consider oddities or differences are only visible if you have a reference point. Without a reference point, it just looks like a display. Your eyes are really easy to trick. Our eyes are actually pretty stupid technology. It's really beautifully advanced in a way, but your brain's also really dumb and pulling a lot of tricks on you. And when you're looking at these displays and looking at the content, it's the elephant thing. I bring this up, and every time William gets mad because now he's thinking about elephants. But if someone tells you to don't think about elephants, the only thing you're going to think of is an elephant. If you're holding an iPad with nanotexture and you say don't think about the nanotexture, you're going to be thinking about the nanotexture. But it really does just go away. There are situations, I'm not going to lie, there are situations where you can see it. There's a little bit of that glossy, grayish reflection light stuff going on. But again, if that was just a glossy display, that grayish thing happening on the display would just be a giant bulb reflection or my face. So I think the trade-off is worth it for me. It's not for everyone. Don't upgrade to a 1 terabyte model just to get nanotexture. If you're buying 256, pretend it doesn't exist, right? This is just the people who are buying 1 terabyte or plus models.
But you're saying that 1 terabyte, that reminds me. You went for you maxed out in every way except the storage. You went for 1 terabyte instead of 2 terabytes. And yes. I can't remember the cost, but it sounds to me like you are happy having gone the way you did, that you wouldn't have liked to skip the nanotexture and put that money towards 2 terabytes, for example.
No, I'm happy with the nanotexture, and 2 terabytes is way too much for me. I need more than 512 for sure, because I will easily exceed that. I've been slowly adding apps to the iPad as I need them. I always start new and just download apps when I decide that I need a certain feature. Funny enough, this is weird. I haven't done much. I think I haven't done much web browsing outside of work because I haven't downloaded one single Safari content blocker engine or anything. Nothing. Which is abnormal for me, but that might just be in how iCloud, what is that called? the safety thing that they do. iCloud something.
Oh, it keeps switching on and off so often. It's burnt into my head. Private Relay. Yes.
So between Private Relay and certain other Safari features, I feel like the web is somewhat tolerable, but there are definitely websites that I open and I'm just like inundated with pop-ups and ads, and it's so annoying. So I might break that and go and get my usual content blocker, but I haven't got that far yet. I'm really interested in iOS 18 and its new engine that it's bringing, where you get to select parts of the page to erase. But maybe that'll replace my content blockers, because apparently I do fine without them for the most part. But also, I'm browsing respectable web pages that aren't inundating me with nonsense. So that, I think there's a difference there.
Of course, there's also this idea, I think probably wishful thinking, that iPadOS 18 is going to change everything, and suddenly we'll understand why the iPad Pro has an M4 and all this power.
There is a bit to that. Two things. We have heard that the M4 is because of the display. Sure, display controllers. We discussed that before, but we got another hint. So, John Turnus and Greg Joswiak have been on their little press tour. I think that's over now, but
I gave them cake when they came to me. Yes, they were very nice. Victoria Sponge, if you're wondering. Okay.
Yeah, did you go meet them on the roof? I love that. They interviewed everyone on the roof of that. Was it Battlesea building? And Greg Joswiak's just chilling in a pea coat and sunglasses, and it was just, I don't know, just looked mob bossy, like they were having this meeting on the roof. And he's here to let me tell you about the iPad, you know.
Right. Okay.
But he did make a mention of something that didn't. I think it went mostly unnoticed, but for me, it kind of stuck. He made the mention that iPad Pro, and I maybe I hallucinated. I tried to find it again, and he kind of says it in one interview. There's so many of them, I'll never find it again. But he alluded to the fact that the iPad Pro, it is basically representative of Apple's first AI first PC, basically this AI personal computer, and that, you know, our updates that are coming later this year. He didn't say WWDC, of course, because he won't give that specific. But he's like, yeah, Tim's basically been saying this is coming. It is coming. AI is important to Apple. We've been doing this for years. You know, it's ML and previously proactive application features and Siri, but now we're going to get into AI and what people call it, and iPad Pro is predispositioned to be an excellent AI computer because of that M4 chip, and I think that may be the story for iPadOS 18, and that's really interesting to me.
This is either going to be the most interesting or the least interesting WWDC in years. It's not going to be a middle-of-the-road kind of one, I think.
Yeah, I think it's exciting, and people need to not get ahead of themselves. Look at all the problems that exist with existing AI tools, right? They make up information.
Yeah.
Hallucinations are everywhere. Even Google's new tool, I see every day people posting nonsense reported by Google's "Let me summarize it for you" feature, and it's just wrong, and Google leaned heavily into this, and then OpenAI is having their snafu with. Turns out they hired an actress that sounds very close to Scarlett Johansson's voice. There's probably going to be a lawsuit.
Yes.
Well, no, it came out that they went and said, no, here's they have documentation showing they hired a real actress. This wasn't made up. People assumed it was made up, but I still think they went out of their way to find a sound alike.
That's the alleged bit. Yes, I believe it was an actress, but the suggestion that it was performed like Scarlett Johansson is a dodgy issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't actually heard it, but she's lawyered up apparently, asking them questions about it, as she should. So
it's just this very breathy voice, you know. Scarlett Johansson has such a very specific voice, that I think mimicking it is obvious, and this feels like they're doing a performance. It's not just someone speaking. So, in any case, there's so many controversies and issues around these tools. I think Apple sees this. I think they're very intelligent about handling these types of things, and they want to avoid it. So don't go into Apple's WWDC expecting to see this term is now loaded, but it has different meanings than what I'm going to say. Apple's going to have a Me Too moment for copying Google and OpenAI and all of that. That's not what Apple's out to do. They're going to do their own thing. So I don't think we should go out there expecting, here's Apple's answer to Gemini, and it's a chatbot, and it does all these, like, it's going to be AI technology, and there's going to be similar feature sets and abilities that you can accomplish. But I would very much expect Apple's going to distance itself as much as it can from the controversial side of this and openly say, we did this with privacy in mind. We paid actors. We paid for photos. Yeah. We got the training legally. And on top of all of that, it's on device, it's personal, it's private, and it's in your total control. And I think that story, accompanied by Apple's specific hardware and software integration, we're going to see something identifiable, a cousin of what exists, but unique because it's Apple talking about it. And I think people will either dismiss it because it's not OpenAI, or they'll accept it because it's Apple. So we'll see what that looks like. So iPad Pro, we have the rest of time to talk about. I mean, I want anyone who has any questions, please email me, or write me on Mastodon. I'm loving this device. I'm excited to write the full review. I've gotten started on that already. Apple Pencil Pro, casting a 3D rendered shadow. I mean, come on, that's just Apple magic all the way through.
Yes,
but
yeah, that is ridiculous and perfect as well. I mean, you got to applaud that effort, I think. Yeah.
Go look at the iPad Pro teardown. The logic board is now in the center on this new skeleton thing they've built to make sure that guys can't bend it in half as easily on YouTube, at least not horizontally. The Apple logo acts as a heat sink. All of your hands are on the edges, so your hands won't get hot anymore because your hands are holding it by the edge of a battery, and not used to be iPads would have the logic board on a side, and that was fine, but all the heat would settle on one side and fry your hand if you were holding it by that. So like, there's just so many intelligent design choices here. It's more than just a thinner iPad. I hope everyone's been paying attention to the content we've been putting out. There's a lot of stuff in show notes here we're not going to get to today, but again, if you have any specific questions as we get closer to WWDC and as this news cycle continues to just be explosive, there's so much to talk about in no time.
Yeah.
We will definitely target any specific things that you guys want to hear about, but we do need to move on to the future, William.
The future.
Not even the iPhone 16, the iPhone 17.
Oh, okay. iPhone 17, the best iPhone we've ever made, is what Apple's going to say, isn't it?
They say it every time.
Yeah, so let's skip 16. In fact, let's wait for the iPhone 20. Why not? That's going to be.
And unironically, I see people post things like that on the internet. I'm waiting for the iPhone 18. I'm like, man, just it's okay. It's okay. But the iPhone 17 rumors are interesting because it's too far ahead. We don't know. It could be thinner. Cool. It's going to use technology from the iPad Pro. But the thing that stood out to me was the iPhone 16 Plus will be the last Plus model that we get. Is this a surprise?
Well, no, because we have the iPhone, we have the iPhone Pro, the iPhone Pro Max, and then there's this, it's not quite revolving door of iPhone Mini or iPhone Plus, but the Plus or the Mini, they never seem to sell as well as Apple hopes, and something changes. So
they're too niche. They're way too niche. It's asking the question of, what if you wanted an iPhone but less features for more money? And that's basically the iPhone Mini and iPhone Plus, because the Plus is basically the Pro without the features. Pay an extra couple $100 and now you have the Pro in name, and that's what people end up doing. The price ladder doesn't need it. You can upscale the base iPhone up to a Pro price if you get enough storage. They became redundant.
No, hang on. The iPhone Mini versions were always, exactly the same as the iPhone, but in a small package.
I was just referencing the Plus.
Is like a bonus, isn't it? So you're paying more. I can remember the prices, but the size is a bonus. And so many people love the size of me. I think we forget sometimes that a niche product for Apple is
still sells
half $500 million or something ridiculous. Stuff that would would make other companies ecstatic.
I personally think the Mini should never have gone away, but even more weirdly, Apple's going to continue the 4 phone plan, but this time I don't know why they keep shuffling this around. Just go back to 3 or add the mini, make the SE the mini. I don't know, just pick one because we keep changing this every other year. But it looks like the lineup's going to be iPhone 17, iPhone 17 Pro, iPhone 17 Pro Max, iPhone 17 Ultra. And we've heard this rumor before.
True. And
Twice,
orbiting all of this, the iPhone SE 4 or 5 or whatever it is by then. I keep forgetting about that. I mean, it is in the lineup, but it does feel like a very separate product launched at a different time and all this, but it's still around.
I mean, making the Pro Max aluminum and the Pro aluminum, just better aluminum than the base model, making the designs, like maintaining the same design layout, maybe giving them ever so slightly richer colors because they're going back to a different they're going back to the standard kind of design philosophy, more or less, for the pros. You're paying for the base model because you just want the absolute lowest end flagship, and then you're paying for the pro models because you want the better cameras. But then what do you get with the Ultra? The Ultra rumor is basically it's thinner, it's titanium, and it has every stop you could imagine, best cameras, 5x telephoto, all of that stuff built in. So I don't know. I don't buy it. This is such an early rumor. We'll see what the iPhone 16 looks like before we start judging that. But speaking of iPhone 16, William, we need to play taps on the program as we say goodbye to the blue titanium color.
No. You can't get rid of blue?
According to analyst Ming-Chi Kuo, who has his pulse on the supply chain, it looks like Apple's going to replace blue titanium with rose pink titanium.
Okay. I'm never quite sure with Ming-Chi Kuo because he feels like he's freelance now, and half the time he's very clear that what he's saying is from his sources in the supply chain, and then half the time he's a little bit not. And with this, I didn't read that about the rose gold, but I read the top line, which was his predictions of it, and I didn't know whether that was more sort of thing I know from the past than I have directly heard. So this case,
he
it
writes
is real.
This way on purpose. Everything, it used to be my sources say, now it's I'm pontificating, and that could mean his sources, or that could mean he's guessing. And that's the trouble with Ming-Chi Kuo. He does have good resources, and honestly, I would believe he's probably a good guesser based on his resources. But he is still a respectable member of this community, of this like leaker community, I guess, and provides accurate enough information that we keep reporting on him. Like I don't think he's going to go away anytime soon, but I would definitely take it with a larger grain of salt than before anyway. But
so I can hope that blue will survive. Okay.
It will at least be on the non-pro devices. But
okay.
A couple last things before we close out. I wanted to point out Vision Pro finally getting more media. The tiniest morsel, of course. We're going to get another adventure episode, parkour, with this famous parkour guy that apparently Malcolm Owen knows all about. I know nothing, but that'll be fun. I wonder how sick we'll get watching parkour in Apple Vision Pro. That should be interesting.
I thought parkour was a type of coat or something, but
no, it's where you jump over things really fast and do a bunch of like gimnastics while you're doing it.
We'll do that. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Very French. Very Assassin's Creed. Yeah. If you've ever seen Assassin's Creed gameplay, which you probably avoided that somehow.
I've heard the name, but okay.
But yes, so that exists. Marvel announces a very interesting looking what if immersive experience. I think it takes about an hour to complete, so that's nice. Doesn't have any big hitter superheroes in it, but it's still you're being indoctrinated into this group of superpowered beings, and you're going to get trained, and it's this whole 3D thing that Disney made for Apple Vision Pro. So that'll be cool. I'm going to be checking that out personally. And finally, I wanted to point out Vision Pro news. Waterfield shield case. So I finally got the review up. That's been in the waiting room for a while, but we finally posted it after all this iPad news. I want you guys to go check it out. This case is near perfect. It actually fits in bags. I got a companion bag for it that it's obviously just made for. It's so good. Check that review out. It does make me wonder, William, let me know if this makes sense. You go to the store and you buy a laptop bag to put laptops in, right?
Right.
But laptop bags don't hold just laptops. They hold, keyboards and accessories and other, maybe a snack. I want that for Vision Pro. I want a Vision Pro backpack or shoulder bag that has a slot for Vision Pro, but also I can stick a keyboard in there, maybe an iPad, instead of it being, because right now all I've seen for Vision Pro is the quote unquote cases, not a bag. You can make it a bag with like a strap or whatever, but it's still a dedicated Vision Pro thingy. I want a bag with a compartment for Vision Pro, if that makes sense, that distinction.
Does this water-filled case include room for? Well, it must include for the battery, but what about the mains cables and things?
Well, so it's actually kind of like Apple's travel case. It comes with a little zipper pouch that acts as a protector for the lenses and holds chargers, extra straps, but all little things. You could possibly squeeze a Magic Keyboard in there. I wouldn't recommend it. That feels like you're adding a pressure point. So honestly, it's just for the Vision Pro and its accessories, just like Apple's travel bag. And obviously, you're not going to fit a keyboard in there. So it's a bag built to put in another bag, which I enjoy. I like the bag in the bag philosophy. Love it. But I would also like to see someone tackle it's a laptop bag, kind of, but there's also a dedicated slot for Vision Pro, and this is what that looks like. I want to see someone tackle that design.
Please explain to me why I'm this interested in a bag I can't buy for a device that I can't get. And yet I am. Okay.
It's so great. I went with the canvas with chocolate leather because I like Indiana Jones, as we all do. And it looks so good. It's getting beat up in the best way. I can re-wax it if I need to, but I'm not going to. It's going to be a nice, rugged-looking bag, and I'm excited for it. I use it and its companion bag for travel and everything now. It's just so nice. I love it. Well, I think we're going to have to cut it off right there. So thank you all for listening. William, where can people find you on the internet?
I'm going to go busking, I think, and try to raise enough money for bags and Apple Vision Pros and stuff. But actually, you can find me via email, as people have been doing recently, and I love this, except they ask complicated questions, and I'm still thinking about them. But William at AppleInsider.com, that gets to me, and I do relish it. So, thank you.
Yeah, maybe the streets of London. If you spot him, go give him go shake his hand as he plays the harmonica. I suppose that would be your instrument. So
no, I was just going to play my iPod. I was just going to play my iPhone.
Your AI
and
band.
Pointed at people. Yes. Okay.
So of course, thank you to all the sponsors, Notion and Fastmail. Before I go, I will say I'm, as usual, available on Mastodon, and you can email me via the email attached to every article that I write. You can find it at the top of the page under the email button. And, of course, you won't find me busking, but you might find me using my iPad outside because that nano texture is beautiful. This week, subscribers will get an Apple Insider Plus segment where we're going to discuss how we handle purchasing physical versus digital media and organizing that. So stay tuned for that if you've paid. If not, we'll talk next week.